we are the mothers of our communities, and so we expect that when we say something, we get response. So I'll say it again. Good afternoon, distinguished participants. Well done. Thank you, UNDP, for bringing us together here. For the benefit of those who do not know us, who are not familiar with our system, we have the patrilineal system and the matrilineal system. Along the southern part of Ghana, from the middle part to the southern, apart from the eastern part of the eastern boundaries, we are matrilineal. So we inherit along the mother's line. And the Queen Mother is, I should say, the traditional first lady of her community. First lady, I say traditional because she's not the wife of the king, nor is she the wife of the president. She is from the royal lineage, the same lineage as the king or the chief, and therefore they are blood relations. She is either the biological mother of the chief, or sister, or auntie, or cousin along that line, not the paternal side. And she is the female counterpart of the chief. As a mother and the mother of the whole community, she is responsible for the socialization of the children and youth in the community. In fact, she must be a role model, a good role model for the people, the young ones in the community to emulate. She must be likened to the modern day Minister for Women and Children's Affairs. So she is responsible for women and children's affairs. At the same time, the youth and almost everybody in the community has the Queen Mother as their mother. Even the chief, whether biological or not biological. So the proper upbringing of the children and the youth in the community must be the responsibility of the Queen Mother. At the same time, she must be seen as the welfare officer of the community, because she must make sure that everybody fares well in the community. She has her court where she adjudicates cases, and sometimes when somebody is not satisfied with what happens in the chief's court, the person could appeal to the Queen Mother's court, to the Queen Mother, and maybe she could step in and help that person out. She is a guidance counselor. If a child is not behaving properly in the community, the mother or the parent appeals to the Queen Mother, and the Queen Mother counsels and guides that person. The Queen Mother must make sure that women in her community have a voice, because of the shy nature of the women in our local traditional communities, and because of the domineering, I wouldn't say that, nature of these people here. Even though among the Akan, those of us who are matrilineal, because the woman, the Queen Mother, is supposed to be the repository of the history of the place, know very well about the structures and systems of the place. And therefore, if the stool becomes vacant, if the chief either goes to the village, because in Akan, chiefs don't die. they go to the village to continue life there. Either that, or when he abdicates, meaning that he stops being chief, or he's destooled, meaning he might have done something for the people to have taken him out of that position, and the stool becomes vacant. Among the Akan, it is the Queen Mother who nominates and who decides who the chief should be, because she's supposed to know the background of every member of the lineage. Sometimes there must be people who had joined the royal lineage, but they are not true royals. So the Queen Mother should know about this, the background of everybody in the lineage, and so would have to decide who should be the next chief. But when they are coming, after they had come and we've put them on, they tell us they are men and we are women. And so that I will stop there. We'll continue.
That's interesting. So I would now like to bring in the ambassador. I'd like to hear the other side of this conversation. How the chieftaincy is organized, and what is the dynamic with the Queen Mothers?
Good afternoon. First of all, let me thank UNDP for inviting me to participate in this dialogue, especially to speak or be a panel member of the Traditional Leaders Forum. As the Queen Mother was speaking, I was paying attention because initially they wield all the power. They do the nomination. They have 3 chances. The first nominee is normally put before the kingmakers. The kingmakers are virtually representatives of the various clans in the community. Let me say that I have been a chief for 43 years. I'm a chief because I am my mother's son, which means I'm also from a matrilineal system, because I come from Ashanti. Now, once you've been installed a chief, you've gone through a sort of vetting. Mere membership of a royal family would not necessarily make you a chief or a king. They look at other qualities, personal qualities, characteristics. Because you see, once you live in the community, people are always monitoring you. So in fact, a friend of mine told me that if you want to be a chief, the best thing to do is to stay outside your community so that people will not know your bad deeds. But once you become a chief, the first thing that you have to do is you swear the oath to your people, to be conscious of your people's progress and welfare. If you break the oath, sufficient grounds for destillment. So when people tell you that we don't have any sort of accountability in the chieftaincy system, sometimes they are being too theoretical. And then after you have sworn the oath, your elders will also swear the oath to you, and you are swearing the oath not only to your elders, but to the whole community. And then we take it from there. The elders constitute a council just to make sure that you have people who will continue to monitor your progress. You see, in Africa, we have had different systems. What I'm talking about pertains to a matrilineal system in Ghana, but we have patrilineal systems too. And in Africa, for want of better classification, we said that we have 2 types of societies: traditional societies. And when we are talking about traditional societies, we are talking about the organic or indigenous system which was in place before the advent of colonialism, which has not been contaminated by colonialism or even by post-colonial distortions or changes. We're talking about a system that was in place before the advent of colonialism. And in Ghana, we've had this for about over 500 years, because we had a system in place before the advent of the Europeans. The first Europeans to arrive in Ghana were the Portuguese in the 15th century. And this system has continued without a break up to now. There have been changes here and there, but the essence of the system is still there. And once you are a chief, before the advent of colonialism, you were the chief executive, you were the head of the legislature, you were the head of the judiciary, you were a military leader, you were a religious leader. Everything rolled into one. But that doesn't necessarily make you autocratic, because as I said, you have a council of elders in place to check you. When the colonialists came, of course, they tampered with the system, changed it. In Africa, as I said, we had two types of societies: the centralized, Ashanti, Oyo. Those are some of the centralized societies. And then we had the decentralized. The difference was that the decentralized, they had no king, they had or chief or monarch, but they had what was called the stateless society. You have village communities, village heads, but no hierarchy. The colonialists changed everything. But it's a mark of the resilience of our institution that the essence of the system has remained all over Africa. So those who tell you chieftaincy is anachronistic, don't believe them. They are just theorizing. Chieftaincy is alive and well. It's not a museum piece. We do a lot. We maintain law and order, even now. The only difference is that we have formal governmental structure. Chieftaincy is informal, and that is the challenge. Going forward, what do we do? How do we combine the best of the West with the best of our indigenous organic institution? I think I'll stop here.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you. And this makes it easy to invite the prince to talk about his community. And he'll tell you more about his community, because we're looking at formality, informality, and the values that we place on those.
Thank you, Miss Sheila. My mother and my father have spoken. They've said the right thing. In Africa, we have our culture, and our traditional system is such that before the advent of the colonialists, like she said, it was this traditional system we're using to rule ourselves. And everybody, we all respected our leaders. We all respected our rulers. In my own land, the Yoruba land, in Nigeria, depends on the declaration, the chieftaincy declaration. If the chieftaincy declaration says a candidate will emerge from only the male child will become a king, well, so be it. But at the time of drafting that declaration, if you all agree that, okay, a female child can come up, provided, there's always a proviso, that he's staying in that community, he lives in that community, he identifies with the community, then he becomes part of that community as a nominated candidate. And in my place again, we believe that whatever the king or the traditional ruler says is final. Because we know that those, unlike nowadays, we see all kinds of characters emerging as traditional rulers. Those who are always trained and brought up and nominated for that position are respected individuals. They are level-headed individuals. And even in our declaration, it is there that you must not be of bad character. You must not have gone to jail. You must not have any infirmity. That is insanity. So by the time you know that you are going on this line, you yourself, you will have censored yourself, self-censorship, in such a way that you will not be associated with any bad thing. You cannot be a traditional ruler now and be known to have stolen. You can't get there. Your family background must be impeccable. They must not find anything that is anathema to the societal values. within your family, whether presently or in the past. So these are some of the things that keep us in check. There are always checks and balances when you are going for that kind of a position. But let me relate it to what we are here for these days, for today. You see, the traditional institutions is such that if the governments of the day, they always run to them when they run into trouble. When you see riots and things like that and they cannot handle it, they always go back to the Obas and the traditional rulers to help them out. But you see, if the government of the day decides to include the traditional rulers in governance, I think it would have been better. Because that time, they'll be able to be very, very close to the people. The local governments these days are no longer close to the people. The local governments, you find all kinds of characters going there to just make money. But a chief, a traditional ruler has a name, has a root, has a history. And if he does anything, it tells on his family. So that is it.
Thank you. I would like to invite the audience members, perhaps I can borrow your mic, and perhaps someone can help me, well, I'll come out, or someone can help me bring the mic, because I'd like to invite the audience into the conversation. If anyone would like, well, actually, I would like to invite you to say something as a writer who knows about these systems, and you've written a very celebrated book in Nigeria. I would like to invite you to enter into this conversation about traditional leaders forum.
This is what always happens to me. I just wanted to help, and now I'm having to say something. Good evening. Yeah, what they're saying resonates with me. This has nothing to do with my book directly, but my grandfather was the Alakberu of Igberu, who ruled for 40 years, and he died in 1976. In those days, from everything that I understand, his position in the wider society was very important, really, really critical. And some will say that some of those systems, not just with colonialism, but even the way we started to practice our own political systems, eroded that authority and in some way diminished what the traditional rulers actually stood for in our societies. My worry these days is that the role in itself, when you have a traditional ruler, this is what happens in Nigeria, they're very, very hard to take seriously because they say things that are sometimes curious, and I'm trying to be polite here. So I would like to see a situation where there was more dignity returned to these roles, but also one where government, and that's in Nigeria now, is not interfering too much in some of these systems that throw up the leaders. Thank you. I'll never forgive you.
Yes, governance interference in traditional institutions. Well, at this level of our development, we cannot run away from it because there's nothing that comes to society and society will take decision upon that you don't have opinion leaders. And these politicians, when they are coming in, they will look for like minds, they look for friends who will assist them to approach the Oba or the traditional ruler there. And the Oba, once he gives his blessing, his followers will also support. And when they get there, they will do the bidding of the Oba, or the Oba, in order not to fall foul of the government, will have to kowtow to them. And these days, we realize that, like our Queen Mother said, these traditional rulers pass on, they transit. And it now falls back to the governor or the political office holders to now say, okay, go and nominate another person. And they are the ones who will bring in their own cronies, who will bring in their own friends as traditional rulers. So we have eroded everything. There is no longer transparency. There is no longer honesty. It's a pity, but we have come to that stage. I will want to commend UNDP for what they are doing, but for UNDP to actually do this thing well, I will want you to focus more on opinion leaders and individuals who are capable of doing these things. If you go and meet the present-day politicians in Africa, they are investors. The present-day politicians in Africa are investors. They have invested heavily in politics, and they will recoup whatever they've put into it. The only institution that is still a bit intact is the traditional institution. Thank you.
I'll invite the Queen Mother and then the Ambassador. Thank you. Yeah, just put it close to your mouth.
This is one of the challenges that the institution of chieftaincy face. A greater part of the power of the chiefs have been taken away from them. Should I say them or us? They've taken the power away from us. And so, and since it's the central government that has the funds, the money to do developmental projects, the chiefs now, or traditional authorities, would now have to depend on the politicians. So if I want a school in my community, maybe I'll have to go to the chief executive, the metropolitan chief executive, or the regional minister, or when during festival time, when the president comes, then the chief would make that appeal. So once you depend on the government for these things, you fall prey, if I should put it that way, to them. And it's one of the challenges. You see, so the chiefs, and I must say, unfortunately, partisan politics has crept into the institution of chieftaincy. So some chiefs openly or indirectly, directly or indirectly, are members of political parties. And that's why if you are a member of a political party, then you do what your party tells you to do, or you do what you want your party to do for you. So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it happens that way. But that's why the chiefs are asking that the power is given back to us, so that if we have our resources, even those resources that we have, they say it's for government. You are only given a part as royalty. So majority and westernization and modernization is having some influence on the chiefs or chieftaincy. So you are forced to do something you may not want to, but because you want to get projects for your community, sometimes you are forced into going the way of the politicians. And that's why you see the chiefs there. It's not that we want to go there, but some have no option because they want projects for their communities.
Ambassador.
Let me clarify one or two issues. In Ghana, the chieftaincy institution is guaranteed under the Constitution. And chiefs are not supposed to engage in active party politics. I know that my area, if a paramount chief, somebody of my status, openly sides with a political party through utterances and what have you, our traditional overlord will not only take kindly to it, but I think he will deal with it. because we are not supposed to engage in active politics. But there's the other reality. And the reality is that you are the leader of a community. You are interested in the welfare and progress of your people. Apart from that, there's a psychological problem. Chieftaincy is political. Whether you like it, chieftaincy is political because it is associated with power and authority. The problem we have, and this is one reason why for a long time, African countries are finding it difficult as to what to do with the institution. You see, if you go back, even in the French countries, where they try to abolish the institution, and even in some English-speaking countries, you will see that those who try to abolish the institutions have now turned around, they are trying to revive the same institutions. Because when you have two countervailing powers, chiefs against government structure, there's a problem. But the state failure in Africa has compelled us to realize that you cannot import wholesale a system from the West, impose it on your people, and think that you can operate the system effectively. You need institutions grounded in your own culture and your social values. So how do you get the two together? So you can still, as a chief, I think, agitate for development projects for your community. But I think as chiefs, if we want to protect the institution, its integrity and its future, we should not be openly dabbling in active politics.
Thank you very much. I think we have one contribution.
Thank you very much. My name is Ozonea Ojielo. I lead the United Nations presence in the Kyrgyz Republic in Central Asia. But just to thank the panelists, but most importantly, my big brother Nana, with whom I worked closely over many years in many contexts. First, I want to congratulate UNDP for having this conversation. Why are we discussing the traditional institution in the context of the structural transformation of Africa? It's partly because of what Ambassador Nana has mentioned about the duality of authority and the legitimacy of the chief, but also that in many of our societies, the governance, the systems of governance are in contention. And you've seen state failures in many parts of Africa. So the first question for us is, for those of us here who represent the UNDP or the UN system in societies where the state has collapsed, you have an opportunity for a new conversation around reconstruction of the state and its institutions and forms of representation and participation. But it can only be organic. You cannot import what works in Ashanti to that particular context. But we need to acknowledge the opportunity to support a national dialogic about what works and use that to construct perhaps something that works. Now for the rest of us, where we are in the standard developmental model as it were, because we've seen the failures of development, the amount of money that has been pumped into so-called development in our society is not working, we see that the traditional institution is relied upon even by the formal state when you need to mobilize domestic actors, you need to mobilize the community for development. If it was a campaign around maternal mortality, HIV and AIDS, or public health, they go to the chieftaincy institution to mobilize the community. So what kinds of conversations are then important to have in these societies to find, as Nana put it, the best of that to make it work? But there are many from among us here who are in places like Mauritius and Seychelles who don't have chieftaincies in governance, but the systems are working. So it shows the complexity of the problem. That if the formal state institutions are working, don't change what works, build on it. But across the length and breadth of the continent, they are not working. And so we need to take out of our Accra an agenda to support multiple level conversations in our own countries. Otherwise, the development interventions we are supporting can only go halfway. They will not reach their full measure because we are not embedding the lessons from this conversation into a new governance paradigm that might increase accountability and legitimacy for Africa beyond the functional legitimacy that many of our governments have.
Thank you so much. That was so clearly and succinctly put. I would perhaps like to also provoke our brother over there who has worked in the Makoko community to talk about, as somebody entering into that community and looking at what works, how the systems work, and what could be done differently in the future. What did you learn from that, and what can you bring into this conversation? Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila, for this impromptu speech I have to give. Well, I think I went to Makoko for the first time about 8 years ago, and it was an interesting learning experience. It's also been one that is continuous, and one of the important things that one realizes is that what we call community is actually mostly a group of very, very different people with different leaderships. And even within, let's say, a very informal, what we would describe as informal communities, there are leaders who take very important positions there. And understanding the structure of that leadership is incredibly important in being able to do any form of work that is meaningful. And that's something that we've learned, and we know a lot better now how to sort of understand the leadership systems and leadership structures before you really begin to act, or before you even begin to engage. And it doesn't matter how difficult it is or how much you learn, what is most important is also continually building that relationship. And I think, I was fortunate to meet with Chief Olaya and several other chiefs in Makoko community. And going forward, we're also really thinking about how to ensure that the relationships to allow the community develop are built properly, and that the investments that will come into it are properly managed. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. I'm sorry. I should have. So in 2011, I was researching affordable housing in Nigeria, in Lagos specifically, and it occurred to me that Makoko and the people who lived on this water settlement, Makoko, which Chief Olaya is from, is a settlement that is largely on water, but also largely partly on land. And people had built thousands of houses, which you might describe as very poor conditions, even slum in some terminologies. But they built a lot, thousands of them. And it occurred to me that these were some of the cheapest dwellings in Lagos. And I decided to learn from this and understand how they built, to develop a new way of building. And they live, and we worked together and created what we call Makoko Floating School, which I think I'll be discussing later on one of the panels. That was 8 years ago, and we have gone on to turn this Makoko Floating School into a prefabricated building system where you can build it, with very simple means, timber frame structure, to build housing, recreational facility, health facilities, and all kinds of things. So it was a co-creation with the community, and learning from how they have built so much out of so little. And in that process, I spent a year building relationships with the community, with the leaders, and also spent another couple of years developing this structure, which became international. And we have now built it in 4 countries, across 3 continents. It's been internationally acclaimed as an innovative nature-based solution for developing cities on water.
That's wonderful. I know we started late and we still have two really interesting and important sessions afterwards, so we may not be able to have the depth of conversation and interaction that we would have wished, but I would like you to please note that there is a cocktail which will happen in the next room from 6 to 7:30, where you'll have a bit more time to be able to have much more free-flowing conversations rather than these panels. I would like to now invite the King. Oh, okay. I will invite the King, Oyo of Toro, to come and make a closing statement at the end, but I'm not sure if he's yet in the room. So before he comes into the room, perhaps our panelists could make short closing statements, and then His Majesty will make a final one, and then we'll wrap up so that people can then go on to the next few sessions. At this time, I will start from that end.
Let me say that closing remarks, both governments and traditional rulers are interested in the development and welfare of their people. We should not be seen as rivals, but as partners. If we are not joined at the hip, then we should be joined at the hip in the promotion of development. Let me also say that if you don't respect your own, nobody will respect it for you. We are Africans. Our institutions have survived for over 500 years. Let's take the best out of our system, marry it with whatever foreign system we think is necessary, and look forward. We have done enough diagnosis and prognosis, and we should have the courage of our convictions to try and promote the development of Africa. That is my understanding of Africa beyond aid. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening once again. My own advice is that at this point in time, governments in Africa should try and look inwards, form an African system of government. Yes, the whites, the developed countries, the Western system is good, but then African system of government recognizes the cultural background of each section of Africa. You don't use what is my own beliefs now for Ghana, nor you use it for South Africa. I always tell people that it's the key that opens the door that you will use. You don't use just any key. If in my country the government wants to do anything, they should consult with me. I am close to the people. I know how to speak to them. But if you bring a project and you put a lot of money, it could fall into wrong hands. But if you go to meet the people and tell them, what do you need? How do we do it? They will show you how to do it. It's an African system of government. When you are bringing projects to them, make sure you go to them and let the governments go to the right people, not just anybody. That is it.
I would say, give us more power, give us the resources, use us. It's a hybrid now of traditional and Western type. So we should do it well so that the balance is created, or it's balanced so that it doesn't fall on one side. The chiefs and queen mothers should be given their proper recognition. We should be resourced because we are closer to the people. If you look at women in government, Parliament of Ghana now, how many women are there? And the women are down there. They need somebody, or they need people they can relate well with, more closely with. And it's us, those of us on the ground, the chiefs and the queen mothers. So please give us the chance, the opportunity, use us the right way. Let us help with the building of our communities, of our nations, and there will be no problem. Our people will be fine, and Africa will go beyond aid. Thank you.
So, perhaps for many of us who were either born or not born in Africa, who are Africans, not born in Africa, born abroad, but identify as Africans, and are beginning to reclaim or learn for the first time our traditions, there is definitely an important and significant role that our leaders have in helping a new generation of Africans to connect to their heritage. More and more, our young people will travel abroad, will grow up abroad, will feel disconnected, but at some point, they will question and ask, where did I come from? What are the value systems that made my parents raise me the way I am? And it's at this time that they will now want to re-engage, and it's wonderful that the systems are accessible and that leaders such as yourself are able to allow, to have a door for a new generation to reconnect with their past. So I'm grateful, I'm so thankful for your eloquence and your passionate and clear statements about traditional leaders. Thank you so much. I'm grateful. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Your Excellency, may I help you? Aha. Thank you, sir. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Once again, we have the honor to invite His Majesty, King Oyo of Toro, to give us some closing words. Your Majesty.
Your Highnesses, the traditional leaders, UNDP Africa team, Excellencies, distinguished participants, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Let me start by welcoming you all to the Traditional Leaders Forum of the High-Level Dialogue on Africa's Money for African Dialogue, A Future Beyond Aid. A future beyond aid simply means that as Africans, we must take ownership and become the architects of our own development. Africa has become so donor-dependent that we rely on donors for too many things, and yet our continent is blessed and endowed with many natural resources. The wealth of Africa lies in the natural resources. The wealth of Africa lies in natural resources, the people and the cultural heritage, which is social capital, and that is a great foundation for Africa's development. As custodians of the cultural heritage and the natural resources on behalf of our people, it is very important that as traditional leaders, we become actively involved in shaping the prosperity of Africa, especially a future beyond aid. Our African traditional leaders and cultural institutions have been the bedrock of positive elements of our society like service, duty, patriotism, togetherness, peaceful coexistence, development, cultural cohesion, and these values have for long underpinned civilization and development. I therefore urge my fellow African traditional leaders to use their trust and influence to build confidence and belief in our people to change their mindsets, to use their own creativity, our culture and resources to transform our continent to a future beyond aid. Africa's label of beggars of the world is totally demeaning because it is against our African values. Traditionally, we teach and train our people to be self-reliant and to work with our own resources, hence the saying, cut your cloth according to the piece you have. Therefore, as traditional leaders, we must go back to the basic African values. We must teach our people more ways of generating money and not begging. Tourism and agriculture are great sources of money for Africa. We should also revive trade amongst our kingdoms and train our people to be able to produce most of the basic goods and services that we often import from outside Africa. Above all, I call upon all African traditional leaders to join hands and work together for the prosperity of Africa. We need partnerships that help our continent to achieve a future beyond aid. For this reason, that from the 7th to 11th of September 2020, I will be co-hosting the first World Monarch Summit 2020 in Toro Kingdom. The World Monarch Summit 2020 will bring together the world's sovereign, hereditary, and constitutional monarchs to build consensus, discuss, and work together on international cooperation and development. We shall use the World Monarch Summit 2020 as a platform to amplify the contribution of African traditional leaders to Africa's development and will provide opportunities for strengthening bilateral cooperation between our kingdoms. I thank UNDP Africa for inviting me to this high-level dialogue and for partnering with African traditional leaders and cultural institutions for the holistic and sustainable development of our communities and continent. I urge UNDP to set up this collaboration, especially to address the climate change crisis. We African traditional leaders and our kingdoms are ready and will and able to work with you to avert the climate emergency. Lastly, I invite you all to visit Toro Kingdom. I thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you. So now, this session closes, and we're going to have a quick changeover. So I'll give people 5 minutes who may want to be part of another session. There are going to be 2 parallel sessions here, creative industries, and then after that, technology and innovation. And each of them are going to talk about how the creative industries can help us shift the African narrative and what creative industries contribute to the economy for this future beyond aid. Technology also, the innovations, the ideas that can contribute to this future beyond aid. But running parallel to this, in upstairs on the ground floor, where you had lunch, Shay, George, some of you, there will be the panel for women trade agribusiness, followed by the panel for there you go, environment, climate change, and youth. You know, we try to give you everything. Because at the end of the day, change comes from the complex interconnections of all these things. And so there's none of them are trivial, all of them are important. And we've brought amazing people to at least even just spark that conversation. So give you just a few minutes for those who may want to be part of the women trade and agribusiness. Those that are staying for creative industries, in a few minutes, Rachel will come up and introduce the speakers. Thank you.